minority view. So we've got a lot to talk about as we tackle this subject.
Yeah, that one verse referring to it is a verse referring to it as a battle.
That's correct.
And a lot of people believe it's a battle to culminate in the Middle East, and there's a valley of Armageddon.
Right. Well, it's called the Valley of Megiddo.
Megiddo, yeah.
Right, which was an Old Testament term that describes this valley where there was a lot of bloody battles that were fought in Old Testament times. And what's happening is people have extrapolated from those Old Testament battles, and they look at the word Armageddon in Revelation 16:16, and I think it's safe to say that the dominant view is that this word applies to a bloody Middle East conflict against Jews.
Yeah.
And there's, various opinions as to who will be the bad guys, whether it's Russia or the Arabs or the armies of the Antichrist or a combination of all of them. The general opinion, which is reflected in a series of novels, which is the Left Behind series.
Yeah,
I don't know if
very
you're familiar
popular.
with those, but they pretty much epitomize the common view, which is basically that at some point in the future, Christians will disappear in the rapture. Then there'll be 7 years of tribulation, during which time the forces of the Antichrist will rise up and then eventually come down upon the Jews in the Middle East. And that will climax at the end of the 7 years in this Battle of Armageddon against Jews, a military conflict. And then at the end of that conflict, or right in the middle of it, Jesus will appear in the clouds at the end of the 7 years and conquer the forces of Antichrist and deliver Israel. So anything that's fomenting in the Middle East causes people to think this must be preliminary to the big battle. And of course, there's a lot of speculation and discussion going on right now because of, as we speak, the current war between Israel and Hamas. That's just surfacing all of these Armageddon speculations once again.
Yeah. So here we go. It's a battle, and it's not World War III, right? It's
not
people.
Yet, anyway.
We had World War II and World War I and II, and people talk about World War III too, almost like factual that well, it will eventually happen. But we're not talking about that kind of conflict, right?
Well, yeah, that's my conclusion. And let me just throw out a few statements, and obviously we can continue to discuss this. But as I mentioned, the popular view sees Armageddon as a military conflict against Jews. As I mentioned earlier, the word Armageddon is only used one time in the Bible. It's a unique word. It's a play on the word Megiddo, going back to the Valley of Megiddo. But the word itself, Armageddon, is completely unique to Revelation 16, verse 16. And when you look at the context, the immediate context, the verses right before the word is used and the verses right after the word is used, it doesn't say anything about a physical military battle against Jews. If you go back to verse 14, I'll just read a little bit here. It says, "They are the spirits of devils working miracles which go forth to the kings of the earth and of the whole world to gather them to the battle of the great day of God Almighty." And then verse 16 calls that battle Armageddon. So Armageddon is, according to the Bible, it's a battle of the great day of God Almighty. It's God's battle. And when you look at this verse that I just read, verse 14, it's pretty clear that the enemy in this battle are the spirits of devils that go out all over the world to the kings of the earth and the whole world to gather them to fight against God. So it's God against the devils. It's God against these spiritual forces and the kings of the whole world that are gathered on the side of the devil. And then when you go down farther past the word Armageddon, it talks about something called Great Babylon that collapses. It says it came in remembrance before God, and God pours out his wrath on Babylon. And then verse 20 says every island flees away, and the mountains are not found. And so when you just put these pieces together, you find that it's really a global battle. It's not just a Middle East-centered conflict. It says nothing in the text about it being a military battle against Jews. It's really God's battle against the global forces of evil that are symbolized by this term Babylon, which goes back to Revelation there's different verses, but chapter 17 describes this mystery woman. She's a harlot.
Mm-hmm.
Her name is Babylon. She's riding a 7-headed, 10-horned beast, and she represents a global religious confusion that dupes the world, and God is at war with her, with the forces of spiritual Babylon and the devils that are behind spiritual Babylon all over the planet. And Armageddon is the clash between God and Babylon goes down. And that's what the context says. It doesn't say anything about this being, like I said, a military battle between the Russians and the Chinese and the Arabs against the Jews. It's God's battle against Babylon. That's what the text says.
Okay. We could understand that. We feel that's happening now. Most world leaders are devils and are led by the devil.
Yeah, I would agree with you.
And we know that there is this new world order coming and being manipulated globally by the world leaders to create a one-world government. And, of course, people think, well, the Antichrist just going to arrive on the scene when he snap his fingers and he's going to have total control of the world. That takes time. There needs to be a lead-up. There needs to be preparation. And these world leaders are preparing his way in bringing the world together. And globalization is happening. And it's being done methodically by the world leaders, including our leaders here in the United States.
Well, especially our leaders.
Yeah, the Bush family has been very involved from daddy to junior, and it continues. So we could understand, we could see that happening.
Yes,
it's a spiritual power bringing this together.
Yes, the forces of evil are active now. It's not something that just happens when Christians disappear.
Yeah.
It's going on now, and it's going to climax when God actually comes at the second coming of Christ to defeat the world forces of the devil. And it's pretty clear when you read the chapter that when Armageddon hits, like verse 20 says, every island fled away, and the mountains were not found. And verse 18 talks about a great earthquake, such as was not since men were upon the earth so mighty an earthquake and so great. I don't believe that Armageddon itself has occurred yet. It's still coming. But the buildup is happening right now, and when it finally hits, God is going to himself wipe out the forces of evil all over the world, not just in the Middle East.
So